Welcome back. You're listening to You Classified today, Tuesday, the 8th of June, on Unity FM 93.5 FM, heart of the city, Birmingham, and the surrounding areas, and also on the internet on www.unityfm.net. Well, it's been a very interesting last half hour. We've been talking certainly about quite a lot about Israel with Brother Dawood Musa Pidcock. We also hopefully will have very, very shortly coming up Alexander Barron. And after 10 o'clock this evening, it will be hopefully Alex Harrison from the Flotilla convoy that's recently got back from the Gaza Strip, the one that got boarded on its way to Palestine. We'll be talking more and get some first-hand account and experiences of what actually happened when the IDF actually entered those boats. So keep it locked to Unity FM 93.5 for that. In the meantime, if you want to have anything, any input on the show, or if you've got a point to make, whether you agree with us, disagree with us, call 0121 772 8892. That's 0121 772 8892. You can send us a text on 07926 843388. That's 07926 843388. And you can also send us an email at our usual uclassified address. That's uclassified@hotmail.co.uk. Letter U classified, all one word, all lowercase, at hotmail.co.uk. We're going to go back to Brother Dawood now, and we're going to continue with what we left off just before the break. Brother Dawood, welcome back. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you. Walaikum salam. You want the point, one of the most important points is to go to what the Bible actually says. And in a book that I'm writing at the moment is actually on this various subject of, and it's called A Change of Heart. The Bible warns the Israelis that because of their actions, what's just happened now with this crash with Bernie Madoff and Goldman Sachs, etc., etc. As the Quran says, it warns about the false Israelites, so those who claim to be the followers of the Torah, about their schemes of dispossession. Now, in 1491 or thereabouts, when we read the Bible, the biblical narrative. And the Bible warns the Israel that woe to him that covets evil gain for his house, that he might set his nest on high, that he might be delivered from the power of disaster. You give shameful counsel to your house, cutting off many people, and sin against your own soul. For the stones will cry out from the wall, and the beam from the timbers will answer it. Woe to him who builds a town with bloodshed, who establishes a city with iniquity. Now this is a warning, and what Israel is doing with the expropriation of land and expanding into the remainder of the Holy Land, and the prophet Malachi also warns them, for behold the day is coming, burning like an oven, and all the proud, yes, all who do wickedly, will be stubble. And the day which is coming shall burn them up, says the Lord of hosts, that will leave them neither root nor branch. This is now the final phase for Israel, and what's happened now, they have now gathered themselves against the orders of the Creator into a place where they will all be easily now rounded up, and there will be no place for them to hide. So this will be their own Holocaust of their own making, because they've gone to a place against the wishes of Allah, and every prophet warned them for the past 2,000 to 3,000 years not to do what they're doing currently in Palestine, building Zion with bloodshed and oppression. And it's Rabbi Meir Kehani warned in 1973 that basically within 3 months of him becoming defense minister, that Israel would be free of its Arab population. By this he meant Arabs in Israel as well as those in the occupied territories. So what we are recognizing is that this is going to be the final reckoning, and unfortunately the stubbornness and the stiff-necked nature of Israelis is that they will only have themselves to blame. The other point that is important, you were talking about events happening in this country.
Yes.
We've seen what happened with this guy going on the rampage, Derek Bird.
Yes.
And basically, what triggered him off? He was paranoid about the taxman, a tax evasion, that he might go to prison. And his brother David basically informed on him to the tax authorities. And, of course, there was this argument over the will. But the pressure on him, his paranoia, came from the fear of being his money being taken from him, and this turned him into this mass killer. And we forget what Imam Ali said: "We withstood the weight of the iron, the stone, and the lash, but found the hardest thing to endure is the burden of debt, the fear of debt, and the fear of loss." And Thomas Jefferson gives a very, very clear understanding. I mean, taxation is only to be used to retire money from circulation. It is not to be used to oppress people. And this is what Thomas Jefferson said in 1816 in a letter to Samuel Kercheval. "With the decline of society begins indeed the bellum omnium in omnia, the war of all against all, which some philosophers observing to be so general in this world have mistaken it for the natural instead of the abusive state of man. And the forehorse of this frightful team is public debt. Taxation follows that, and in its train wretchedness and oppression." Now, these are things that we have, and this government that's just come in now believes this is going to actually lessen the likelihood of things happening like that. And basically, this is what needs to be fought against: is the stupidity of believing that the meltdown of society is not going to happen under a regime that actually puts money before well-being of people. So,
just before you go on, actually, Brother Dawood, we have a caller online to actually put a point to you regarding a point you made about the link to Israel and the whole nuclear thing.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can get Brother Nath online. Brother Nath, assalamu alaikum.
Hello, assalamu alaikum. All the brothers, Brother Dawood, assalamu alaikum.
Well, alaikum salam.
Just an interesting topic again today. We're basically on the discussion of Armageddon and the nuclear context of it all. Quick question, basically, I wanted to ask you, brother. I mean, the only nuclear, a Muslim country that possesses nuclear weapons is Pakistan. Where does that fit in as all this scenario with Iran developing its nuclear weapons, the allegations of Pakistan supplying them the blueprints for nuclear weapons, Turkey being a close relationship with the Pakistan military? Do you think this is leading up to a bloc without the Arabs, the Persians and Turkish and probably the Asian Pakistanis, to counter the Israeli onslaught on the Palestinians?
Well, I think this is the question is that a nuclear deterrent will not create peace and harmony. Pakistan has nuclear weapons, okay, but what sort of a mess is the country in? It doesn't. It is. And of course, the Americans wish to remain in very close proximity to the nuclear weapons. So the occupation and that major nuclear force is to make sure that Pakistan doesn't ever use them.
Mm-hmm.
But so there is no. Russia has more nuclear weapons than America. But look at America; it has a huge nuclear arsenal, but it can't. It hasn't stopped it from suffering the worst crash since the 30s. The problem is believing that you can actually find a means of defending yourself when in actual fact you're destroying the countries. All these countries are being destroyed from within, including America.
Yeah, all the Muslim countries. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Well, all those countries. Look at the state of Russia. Look at the state of America. It is there is no security. All power is with Allah, and this is folly. But it makes money. The arms industry makes colossal amounts of money for certain groups, but you have to then have India, of course, has nuclear weapons, but there is a policy to try and get countries to attack one another in order to reduce population. And this is
Malaysia, India, Pakistan thing I read about. Apparently they want a nuclear holocaust there, or
they want conflict that will actually. This is Mel Thomas Malthus, the concept. But Kissinger, if you have the access to the internet, Google in NSSM 200, National Security Memorandum 200, and you will find there that policy document signed by Kissinger, Scowcroft, and Bush Senior. Was showing that the threat to America, the greatest threat is population. And 13 countries needed to have their populations reduced, according to Kissinger's memorandum. So how you do that is by economic means where possible, by military means where necessary.
Brother Dawood, if I may come in here.
Yes.
You mentioned the nuclear conflict and the whole little bit of the eugenics there about population control. Recently, we have had reports that South Korea is staging military exercises in North Korean territory, together with the Americans are now, the Americans are now joining in the military exercise with South Korea. How much do you think it would then provoke the North Korean to actually be drawn into a war with South Korea and possibly use a nuclear weapon?
Yeah, well, this would be, but remember that you have truth and falsehood, and you have hak and batil, and the truth is that you have Islam, and then all the other systems comprise one system in itself, and war is a concomitant of interest, of debt and interest, and diversions are what you want when you have an economic problem. You have to divert attention. So the North has to have a conflict with the South and vice versa. It is always to do with debt, interest, and avoiding changing things to a system in which justice prevails. The Americans are still there. They're still in Cuba. The Americans have there's Guantanamo Bay, but they have a naval base there. So this has been strategy to be in a position where you can provoke things. And but war is not something that they're against. Because arms industry, arms trade, relies upon conflict, and it's the one article that you manufacture, whether you manufacture a nuclear missile or a conventional missile or a warship, anything that or munitions. They've been bombing Afghanistan. To use up munitions that you then have to reorder. It's because that's part of the debt interest-based system. You have to have war as a part of the mechanism of the economy.
And that was brother.
NASA just called in.
NASA just called in. Thanks for the call, NASA, and a very interesting point. Sorry, brother, I'll continue.
It's okay. Hello. Yeah.
I think the brother got cut off there, but if you could carry on what you were saying anyway.
Well, I just don't want to sit and pontificate about things, but to point out that the idea that NATO, all these bodies are there to do anything other than actually control things in the interest of the banking system, which is, unfortunately, we're back onto the thorny subject of why these conflicts are so readily sort of engineered, is because it suits the present system, and it is a satanic system. This is not a system built on peace, it's built on conflict. And so Shaitan, Hizbul Shaitan, are always looking where they can create problems for Bani Adam, for humanity, and the only way out for it is for people to realize that they have to come to a realization that the present system is one which is satanic and anti-human, and the Muslims have got to stop supporting that system and actually doing what the Prophet said. We can't work in this market, in establishing a market in which justice and we will see the light of Islam prevail.
Let's go to our caller again. Hello, caller.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum salam.
MashaAllah, great show, brothers. Must admit, very, very informative. And MashaAllah, you're doing a great job, great service to the community.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, just a couple of, just a question and a comment, really.
Sure.
Comment first, basically. With this recent attacks on the Flotilla.
Yes.
And also
Yes.
I don't know if you noticed, but I've been listening and watching the news, certain news channels and the radio stations, and basically, the propaganda that these guys use, it seems like they're so professional that it's like that they get away with murder basically. Every time you hear them, right? I mean, they seem to sort of convince the Joe Blog on the street that Israel is always right and the Palestinians are always wrong. I mean, these are this is a country, Palestine, which 80% is occupied and about 15-20% is left for the Palestinians, and that with thousands of checkpoints. And I mean, last week, after the attack, a certain guy came on to represent Israel, and basically I found in this radio station. Yeah. And the amount of arrogance that this guy had, he just would not, and he was absolutely brilliant at diverting attention away from the real issues. And he kept bringing in, Iran and other countries and saying they're the terrorists, they're more dangerous, and these Palestinians are terrorists.
Well, I mean, if I may come in there, brother, how do you define the Palestinians as terrorists? Now, you see, last week this flotilla was attacked. I mean, there was no Palestinians on board on that flotilla. Also, the Israelis have attacked Palestinian. It's the biggest open-air prison in the world.
Yeah.
So Hamas again is a legitimate government, a democratically elected government. Now, if we are living in a democratic society, then how can you define Hamas as a terrorist organization if they've been legitimately voted in by the people of Palestine?
But do you think that this is serving their purpose? That as long as people like Hamas are in, I'm not saying they're wrong or right, but they'll always find that the friction between Hamas and Fatah and the Muslim leaders, for instance.
First and foremost,
the Arabs are basically the Arab leaders are basically deaf, dumb, and blind as I see it. I mean, look at Mubarak. I mean, for goodness' sake, how can you be neighboring a country in the name of humanity, your own brothers, regardless?
I just want to say something interesting here, actually. And this is a little email I've received here. It's from Israel Connect, and they've got a little function they're doing on the 10th, or this Thursday, actually, in St. John's Wood Synagogue. Now, it's called Brand Israel. That's the title. Basically, what they're discussing is why is Israel's PR so bad? So you've got a chap here, which is the head of Israel's brand management. Their brand management team is going to explain why he thinks Israel's PR has a long way to go and the strategy he's implementing to improve this. PR, of course, is public relations. So here they are in the UK having a meeting about this. Obviously, this is quite rocks the Israelis a lot, basically. Otherwise, they wouldn't be holding conferences like this, would they? But
the danger is that they don't seem to feel that they're wrong, even though in the rest of the eyes of the world, that at the same time, you never ever see that them having. So they say that democracy, and yet there's been so many protests in Israel by good Jewish people, and who think that are wrong with Zionism itself, and yet the world never ever sees those pictures. Why is that?
Can I come in on this? I want to quote you from Yitzhak Shamir, who was the first, was an Israeli prime minister and a member of the Jewish terror group Lehi, who wrote this in an article entitled "Terror," published in 1943 in the Lehi journal Hazit. This is what he said: "Neither Jewish morality nor Jewish tradition can be used to disallow terror as a means of war. We are very far from any moral hesitation when concerned with the national struggle. First and foremost, terror is for us part of a political war appropriate for the circumstances of the day.
That pretty much sums it up, to be honest.
Right? You can't get much clearer. Yet, Shamir, he was wanted. He was a terrorist, wanted, as were several other Israeli prime ministers wanted as war terrorists, as terrorists and war criminals. And Shamir, that's what he wrote. I'm going to read it you again. Neither Jewish morality nor Jewish tradition can be used to disallow terror as a means of war. We are very far from any moral hesitation when concerned with this national struggle. First and foremost, terror is for us part of a political war appropriate for the circumstances of today. So Hamas can use the same argument if it so wishes.
I mean, we were hoping to get Sir Sgt Kaufman on today, and you can see his latest speech on YouTube, how strongly he condemns.
No, he's extreme. He was at the Make War a Crime. This was a few months ago in London, which I attended with Dr. Mahathir and it was the Malaysians who had organised that. And Sgt Kaufman always has spoken. He refused to go to Israel. He called it a terrorist state years ago. He's always been very, very outspoken.
Yeah, also it's great to hear someone like that, who actually lost his own family in the Holocaust as well, being a Holocaust survivor himself, so strongly in condemnation. And of course, he was talking actually about the roots of Israel, the Stern Gang, and how they commit acts of terrorism by attacking the British embassies in the very early days of the forming of the Israeli state.
Yeah, all kinds of intimidation. The greatest, if you look at the records of the FBI, most of the mafia, the gang bosses, were Zionists, and of course Meir Lansky was the mogul of the mobs. He was the financier, the one who went to live in Israel, but he was the main financier. And there's a book called The Mogul of the Mobs, and he was it. Yet he escaped from prosecution by going to live in Israel, which, of course, has been standard procedure. Even the woman who was the inheritor of Tesco, after the gerrymandering in London, she went to avoid being prosecuted, went to live in Israel. So this one is to do as I say, not do as I do.
Can I just ask a question, if that's okay?
Yeah.
Right. Basically, I mean, with what happened to the Jewish people, and we know that what Hitler done was absolutely atrocious, because nobody deserves any humanity. But the million-dollar question is, how can the people who were so oppressed, and there seems so much devastation, how can they all of a sudden become so, their hearts have become stone? How is that? I mean, I'm not talking about the majority of Jewish people, but the people who say they're Jewish, but they are obviously Zionists, or they have an agenda.
But it goes back earlier than that. You've got go to the Bible, Jeremiah. This is the Old Testament. This is before Zionism or Ashkenazim were actually part of the scene. These are the children of Israel, and the Quran tells us, and the Bible. This is what the Bible says. Old Testament. Go and get the Old Testament. And this is Jeremiah 29:17-30. Thus saith the Lord of hosts, behold, I will send against them, the Israelis, the sword and famine and pestilence, and will make them like vile figs that cannot be eaten. They are so evil, and will deliver them to be removed to all kingdoms of the earth, to be a curse and an astonishment and a hissing and a reproach amongst the nations, whither I have driven them, because they have committed villainy in Israel, and have spoken lying words in my name. For lo, the day comes, saith the Lord, when I shall bring again the captivity of my people Israel and Judah. Okay? And I will cause them to return to the land that I gave to their fathers, and they shall possess it. As the Quran says, we aided you with wealth and children, and made you more numerous in manpower, saying, if you do well, you do it for the benefit of your own souls, but if you do evil, you do it to its detriment. So when the second of our punishments came to pass, this was 70 AD, after they rejected Isa, alayhi salam, we sent against you others from amongst our servants to ravage and disfigure your faces, and to enter the temple even as they entered it the first time, and to lay waste with utter destruction all that fell into their hands. It may be that your Lord will have mercy upon you, but if you return to your crimes, Judah and Israel, we will revert to our punishment. And we have made hell a prison for those who insolently reject faith and belief. Surah 17 Al-Isra, verse 1 to 8. Okay? So this is what the Bible says and what the Quran says to them. And they have been rejected from 47 countries and cities over the last 1,000 years.
Just coming up to another short break. Inshallah, I hope that Brother Woken can join us after the break. You're listening to the U-Classified radio show on Unity FM 93.5, Heart of the City. Please join us after these short ads. We'll be back after this.